Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Dalet. We're at the last line on Daf Kuf Gimel, Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Omar of Acha bar Abba, Omar of Yochanan. We discussed upgrading one's clothing, l'kavod Shabbos. Where do we find this concept in the Torah that one's attire is meant to reflect the day, the experience at hand? Minayin l'shinu b'gadim min Torah. Where do we find this concept of upgrading one's clothes to reflect, to relate to the experience at hand? Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk of Pashat, as begodov v'lovash begodom acherim. The Torah is speaking regarding the kohen who's going to remove the ashes, export the ashes which accumulate on the mizbeach. He's going to take them out of the machna, out of Yerushalayim, and the pasuk says he's meant to take off his ordinary bigdei kehuna, v'lovash begodom acherim. He's meant to put on other clothing. Now we're speaking about wearing bigdei kehuna, of course, but evidently the Torah is telling him to go ahead and downgrade the quality of his clothing. When he's engaged in menial labor, when he's exporting the ashes, he's meant to wear clothing of lesser elegance, of lesser significance, less expensive bigdei kehuna, rather than wear the more prominent begadim that he wears ordinarily during the actual avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, the akrav of the karbanos. So we see this concept that one's attire is meant to reflect, to relate to the experience at hand. Therefore, the karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash, which are higher ranking avodos, they need more elegant begadim. So the Torah once again is telling him to downgrade when he goes and exports the ashes. Apparently, during the actual avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, he's meant to wear more prominent, more elegant begadim. V'tanat ve'rishmal limdecha Torah derech eretz. Here the Torah teaches you derech eretz. Begadim shabishal behem kedei l'rabbi. The begadim in which a servant cooked the dish, the pot for his master. So this is a menial labor. With those same clothing, al yimzig behen kais l'rabbi. Should not use those same clothing when he pours the kais, when he directly serves his master. So one is meant to upgrade when he directly engages and serves his master. Likewise, when it comes to the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, during the actual karbanos, being makir the karbanos, pouring the nesachim, which is similar to eating and drinking, serving food and drink to Hashem, so to speak. So that requires more elegant begadim, as opposed to the begadim worn during the Hotzos Hadeshen, which is a lower ranking experience, lower ranking service, which is akin to the cooking of the meal, which require a downgrade in the quality of the begadim. Let's see Rashi inside. Up on the top line, beginning with the words Minayin l'shinu begadim shu derech kavod l'fnei hamakim. Where do we find that changing begadim is considered to be a derech kavod? V'lovash begadim acherim b'Hotzos Hadeshen hiskikei akasav lilbosh begadim pchusim. B'shas Hotzos Hadeshen, the Torah required him to downgrade, to wear clothing of lesser quality during the exporting of the deshen. She'ein avodah chashuva, because it's not as prominent. It's not an avodah chashuva. Kedei shelo yimasu begadim hachashuvim, so that the more elegant begadim don't become repulsed. She'ovid ben avodas achilo shtiyah yon kitav v'nisach. Those begadim which he serves Hashem with the more prominent forms of avodas achilo v'shtiyah, eating, drinking, could go in kitur, makib the karbanos, which is similar to achila, v'nisach, pouring of the wine, which is similar to drinking. So there are 2 points here. Number one, the clothing that he's going to wear during the akrava of the karbanos are meant to be clean and unsoiled. But if that would be the only reason that he needs to change clothing, then he would simply change after exporting the deshen. So when he goes back to the avodah, to the karbanos, he would go ahead and change to clean clothing. Apparently, it's much more than that. The Torah is telling him change before you engage in exporting of the deshen. There's another point here. Since the avodah of the karbanos are more prominent and higher ranking, the begadim worn during those karban, during those avodas, are meant to be of higher value, more elegant. So when he goes and engages in exporting the deshen, he's meant to downgrade, switch into lower quality begadim. Continues the Gemara. Continue with the topic of begadim and cleanliness. It's unfitting, unbecoming for a Talmud Chacham that he should go out wearing patched up shoes. Says the Gemara, Rab Acha Chanina nofik. Rab Chanina did go out wearing patched shoes. Says the Gemara, Rab Acha Rav Nachman, B'tlai agabi tlai. The restriction is merely when there's a patch on top of another patch. That really looks clumsy and unsuitable for a Talmud Chacham, but a single patch, that's okay. V'amar Chi b'amar Rav Yochanan, Kol Talmud Chacham shenimtza revav al bigdoi. So if a Talmud Chacham has a revav, a grease stain on his beged, chayav misa. Why? Shenemar kol misanai avomavis. All my haters love death. Al tikru misanai ela masniai. Those who cause others to have sinner for me. Explains Rashi that a Talmud Chacham who is full with Torah, he represents Torah learning. So when he is not particular about the cleanliness of his clothing, so he denigrates himself in the eyes of the masses, and they go ahead and they associate this behavior with Torah, and they say, well, Torah is not something which is attractive and desirable. So by doing this, by behaving in this manner, he makes Torah repulsive and puts it in a negative light in the eyes of the Briyas, of the masses. So he's being masni Torah, he's making them hate Torah. Continues the Gemara. Ravina Amar, Revad Itmar. So before we said Revav, which means a grease stain, Ravina had a different version, Revad. Revad is referring to a stain of zera, shechah zera in his clothing. Says the Gemara, there's actually no dispute here. When Ravina discussed Revad, the stain of zera, he was speaking about levusha, which is the inner garment. When the Gemara discussed Revav, the grease stain, that was the glima, the outer garment, which is visible to the public. So even a grease stain, it makes him repulsive. Well, what's he doing wearing a grease stain on his outer beged? He should be more particular about the cleanliness of his clothing. So that's a problem. But if there's a grease stain merely on the undergarment, on the inner begadim, where they're not so visible, so even if one notices them, not so terrible. It's not meant to be noticed. So he's not causing them to have sinna for Torah, etc. However, when it comes to revad, a stain of zera, that's a reflection of untidiness and clumsiness. And even if that's found on an inner garment, that makes him repulsive in the eyes of the public. So it depends what garment we're speaking about. On the glima, which is the outer garment, there, even a grease stain is problematic. Whereas b'levusha, in the inner garment, over there only a zera stain is a problem. Continues the Gemara of Amar B'chei Amar Rav Yochanan. My dichsiv. So Hashem is saying regarding Yishayahu Hanavi, Kasher Holach Avdi Yishayahu, just as my servant Yishayahu went Orum, unclothed, v'yochif, and barefoot. So this was meant as a sign for what's going to befall, the troubles that are going to befall Mitzrayim and Cush. So the pasuk seems to say that he went without clothing, barefoot, and he went this way in this manner for 3 years. Says the Gemara, how could that be? For 3 years? How could it be literally without clothing, without shoes? Rather, Ora means b'bgadim bluim, he wore worn out clothing. V'yochef means b'na'olim hametulaim, wearing shoes that were patched up. Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah in Mikvais regarding the halachas of chatzitza. So what is considered to be a chatzitza to prevent, halachically considered to be into a position, a prevention, a barrier from allowing the water to reach the utensil, which will preclude its immersion in the mikvah. One cannot be toivel something which has a chatzitza. So to what extent is something a chatzitza? It's not something we learned in the Mishnah. Revav al mardas, if there is a grease stain on the mardas, this saddle cloth which is on the chamar, on the donkey, so even a small size grease stain is something which the owner is particular about, and therefore it's makpid, and therefore it's considered to be a chatzitza. So Revav al Amardas choitzitz. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, not a small stain, that's not significant enough. It needs to be a larger stain, at iser talki. So it needs to be at least the size of an iser talki, which was a certain coin, but up until that point, there's no chatzitza. So this is regarding the mardas. What about a stain found on a beged? Vala begodim? It depends. Mitzad echad any chaytitz. If the stain is merely visible on one side of the beged, then it's not considered to be halachically chatzitza. It's not significant enough. The owner is not makbid on it, and therefore it is batal. It's considered to be subordinate to the beged, and does not form a barrier from the water reaching the beged. That's only if it's visible on one side. Mishneit tzaddim, but if the stain is deep enough that it's visible on both sides, it's considered to be a more significant stain. Chaytzitz, it poses a chatzitza. So according to the Tanakama, regarding a beged, if it's on one side, it's not a problem. If it's on both sides, then it is a chatzitza. Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, af mitzad echad chaytzitz. When it comes to a beged, even if it's only on one side, a person is makbid on a stain found on his clothing, and therefore it poses a chatzitza. Boimene, Rav Shimon Lokshim Rav Chanina, mardas. What about this saddlecloth? Mitzad echad, oy mishnei tzaddim. We spoke about this stain on the saddlecloth. We didn't elaborate whether it needs to be found on both sides to pose a chatzitza, or if it's merely on one side. Is that already considered a chatzitza? Amar le, so Rav Chanina responded, I don't really know. Zulay shamati. Regarding this specific question, I didn't hear any clarity. However, something similar to this I have heard. The Snan, as we learned. Rabbi Yosi Omer, Shel Banoin Mitzad Echad. So we had the Tanakama, which told us that a beged is only chatzitza if the stain is on both sides. We had Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shmuel who told us that when it comes to a beged, even a one-sided stain is a chatzitza. Rabbi Yosi has a different version of Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. He says, not every beged. It depends. If it's a beged shel banoin, that belongs to Talmid Chacham, which will more particular at the cleanliness of their clothing, in that case, indeed, mitzad echad, even a stain on one side is a chatzitza. V'shel bur, but of a unlearned fellow, who's not so particular about his clothing, b'shnei tzaddim. In that case, only if the stain reaches through the beged and is visible on the other side as well, does it pose a chatzitza. So this is what I heard. Now we can conclude from this. We can apply to mardas. Why? V'loitei mardas chashuva b'bigdash la'ma'aretz. You cannot say that a mardas, a saddlecloth, is something more significant and more prominent than a beged of Amaretz. So if when it comes to a beged of Amaretz, the stain is only reckoned if it is visible on both sides. Certainly the mardas requires the stain to go through and through to be considered chatzitza. So, according to this response, a mardas is different than a beged. A mardas needs the stain to go through and through, otherwise it's not a chatzitza. It says, well, my banoin. So Rabbi Yosi says, well, a beged, a stain on a beged, if it's shel banoin, if it belongs to the banoim, then even a one-sided stain is sufficient to be a chatzitza. But from a beged of a bur, of an unlearned fellow, then the stain needs to go through and through. It says, well, my banoim, what exactly are these banoim? Rabbi Yochanan, elu tamid chachamim, she'oiskim b'binyan shel olam kol yameim. These are tamid chacham that are immersed in Torah, involved in the building of the world. Torah sustains the world. It avails, it gives the opportunity for Hashem to spread His light to His creations. It keeps the world going. So they're called banoim, and indeed they're meant to be more careful, more particular about the cleanliness of their clothing, as mentioned earlier. Therefore, even a small stain, a one-sided stain, is considered to be enough to pose a chatzitza. So in summary, we learned about the halacha of chatzitza. On a mardas, as we concluded, needs to be through and through from both sides. Now, what is the size of the stain which poses a chatzitza on a mardas? According to the Tanakam, even a small stain, according to Shimon Gamliel, up to this Isser coin, it's not reckoned with. Only once it reaches the Isser is it considered to be a significant enough stain. Regarding a stain on a beged, we have three shittas. According to the Tanakama, it needs to go through and through. It needs to be mishnei tzaddim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, even on one side is considered chatzitza. According to Rabbi Yosi, it depends. If the clothing belongs to the banoim, then even on one side it's significant. If it belongs to ordinary people, it belongs to the Amaretz, for instance, then it needs to go through and through. What are banoim? So the Gemara, they are Talmid Chachamim. The Gemara soon will actually give us another interpretation. It's referring to the clothing worn in the bathhouses, which are required to be extra clean, and therefore they're more particular with them, and even a one-sided stain is significant. Continues the Gemara on the topic of Talmid Chachamim. Rabbi Yochanan, Ezo Talmid Chacham, who is regarded as a Talmid Chacham, Shemachzir le'aveda b'tzviyas ayin. We know, generally speaking, one is meant to provide a bona fide siman, a sign to prove that the lost item, the aveda, is his. But a Talmid Chacham, whose word is reliable, he's a man of integrity. Even if he merely says, look, I recognize this is mine. The halacha is that they are machzir to him an aveda b'tzviyas ayin, merely through recognition. So who is considered to be a Talmid Chacham with regard to this halacha? This is speaking about a Talmid Chacham who is makbid on his chaluk, on his robe, to overturn it. He sees that he wore it inside out and the seams are visible on the outside. He goes ahead and he turns it back in the right way. He doesn't walk around wearing his clothing overturned with the seams visible. He regards himself with self-respect and honor. And certainly his word is reckoned with and is reliable. He's a man of integrity. So this is considered to be a Talmid Chacham with regard to this context, this halacha of returning to him aveda through mere recognition, merely relying on his word. So different levels of Talmid Chachamim. Who is regarded as Talmid Chacham with regard to the concept of that they appoint him as a leader of the tzibur, of the community. This man needs to be a well-learned fellow. This must be a person who, when they ask him advar halacha, anywhere in Shas, and he can respond properly. He's learned it all the way. He knows everything, so he can respond anywhere. Even if they ask him something halacha contained in a lesser-known mesechta, such as Meseches Kala, even that he knows. This fellow is fully capable, fully knowledgeable, and he's meant to be appointed as a parnas al tzibur. Rabbi Yochanan, Ezo Talmid Chacham, shebnei iroi mitzuven laslei melachtai. What is considered to be a Talmid Chacham with regard to the obligation of bnei iroi, his fellow city residents, are mitzuven, obligated laslei melachtai, to do his work for him, to give him sustenance, provide him with parnasa. Who is this type of Talmid Chacham? One who disregards his own pursuits, and he involves himself in heavenly matters and spiritual matters and communal matters and communal affairs. He's dedicated to the affairs of the community. This fellow must be supported by the community. This is said regarding being tarech, them burdening themselves for his rifte, for his bread, meaning to supply him his bare necessities, which he doesn't have the opportunity to do on account of his involvement in communal matters. So even though he's not the most learned fellow, but if he's a Talmid Chacham who is totally engaged and immersed in communal matters, he's meant to be supported by the community. Rabbi Yochanan, Ezo Talmid Chacham, who is regarded as a Talmid Chacham, one who can be asked regarding a halacha anywhere, on any topic, and he can respond in kind. What is the application here? So this fellow is meant to be appointed as a leader of the community. Now it depends. This is basically what we discussed earlier, but Rabbi Yochanan is going to elaborate here. It depends. There are different levels in this itself. If he's well versed in the one Masechta, apparently we're speaking about the Masechta that he's actually currently learning, then Ba'asrei, he's meant to be appointed as the leader in his place, in his community. But if he's well versed in all the Masechtas, then he's a much higher, more prominent Talmid Chacham, and therefore Bereish Mesifta, he's meant to be appointed as the leader of Bereish Mesifta, the head of the yeshiva, and the head of the academy. So this is the discussion regarding Talmid Chacham. And how do we get into this? Because regarding Chatzitza, we spoke about the beged of Talmid Chacham, the Shalbanoin, which Rabbi Yochanan interpreted to mean the begadim of Talmid Chacham who build up the world, and their begadim meant to be clean, and even a less significant, less prominent stain is reckoned with and is considered to be a Chatzitza. So let's make a quick summary regarding the different levels of Talmid Chacham. So firstly, we spoke about the shoes of a Talmud Chacham. Talmud Chacham is not meant to wear shoes outside which have patches on top of patches. We discussed the cleanliness of his begadim. And the Gemara told us that the outer beged is meant to be free of even ravav of grease. The inner beged, at least, it shouldn't have ravad, a stain of zera. We discussed various levels of Talmid Chachamim. A Talmid Chacham was makbid al chalukah, that the seams are not visible. This fellow, we are machzir and aveda even if he merely recognizes it. A Talmid Chacham who can be asked anywhere on any topic, he's meant to be appointed Rosh Hashiva. A Talmid Chacham who is knowledgeable on that Masechta, he's meant to be a Rosh B'mkayma in his neighborhood. And Zmar told us, even a lesser learned Talmid Chacham, but if he's Oiseh b'chavsei Shamayim, he's involved in communal affairs, Oisen Loi Parnasasai, then his fellow residents are meant to supply him with his sustenance. Continues the Gemara. Getting back to the Chatzitza, where we learned about the begadim of Shel Banoim. In that case, even a one-sided stain is significant. Rabbi Yechon said Banoim means Talmid Chachamim. We have another opinion. Rav Shimon Malakish Amar, Elu Kelim Ha'olyarin Habayim Medinas Hayam. These are the garments, the Olyarim, which belong to the bathhouse operators. So these garments were made of higher quality material, Habayim Medinas Hayam, which were brought from abroad. And regarding these begadim, they were meant to stay clean, and they were very particular about them. And even a small stain, even only a one-sided stain, is considered to be makbid and poses a chatzitz. Says Gemara, do you mean to say the chivri ninu, that they were white-colored garments? Because otherwise, why would they care so much about a small stain? So apparently they're white. V'amarlu Rabbi Yanai lebanov. Didn't Rabbi Yanai tell his children? He told Lebanov his sons, Banai, my sons, Al tikberuni, don't bury me, lo became Lebanim, not with white garments, lo became shchirim, nor with black garments. Why? Lebanim, don't bury me with white clothing, because Shemalei Eska, perhaps I will not be Zoicha, and I will sit amongst the those who are in Gehenim, as Rashi says, they're black colored. And if I wear white, I'll stick out like a sore thumb. I'll look like a chassan who wears white between mourners who wear black. So don't dress me in white. Shechayrim, likewise, don't dress me in black. Perhaps Shemai Eska, I will be Zaycha, and I will end up in Gan Eden where everyone's wearing white. And if you dress me in black, I will be Ve'eya Ka'avel ben Chassanim. I will appear like a mourner wearing black amongst Chassanim. So don't dress me in white nor in black. Ella, something in the middle. But Kalim Hol Yarin, Haboim Dinasayam. Dress me with those Kalim Hol Yarim of the bathhouse operators, which are used in the bathhouses. So Alma, apparently Sumkininu, they're red. So how can you say that they're white? Says more like Kashia. It's not difficult. Habiglimi, Habilavushi. There are two types of begadim worn in the bathhouses. There were the outer ones, the glimi, the outer robes. As Rashi says, they were sumki, they were red. Habilavushi. Lavushi is the inner clothing. They were white. So Rav Shimon Lashish tells us that the white begadim worn in those bathhouses, they're meant to be free of any stains. So even if they only have a stain on mitzad echad, it's considered chatzitza. Continues the Gemara. Reb Shimon Oil Mekaplin. So getting back to the Mishnah where Shmuel told us that Yom Kippur is considered to be less severe, on a bit lower level than Shabbos, and therefore one can prepare from Yom Kippur to Shabbos. Likewise, when it comes to the karbanos, one may go ahead and be makriv the leftover carbon which was brought on Shabbos. He may bring those chalavim, those leftover fats, and offer them on Yom Kippur, which falls out after Shabbos. Tana Rabbanan, Oila Shabbos b'Shabbatai. This is discussing the carbon tamid on Shabbos. Now these words seem to be superfluous. Oila Shabbos Shabbatai. So we learn a drasha. The pasuk is coming to include something, a riboy, as well as to exclude something, a miyat. So we have a riboy and a miyat. So Bishmol's approach is that the pasuk is coming to teach us limit al chelvei Shabbos shekrev miyam kippurim. The Torah which says that oilas Shabbos is to be offered b'Shabbatoi. It means that the chelvei Shabbos, the leftover fats from the carbon which was brought on Shabbos, oilas Shabbos, shekrev miyam kippurim, is going to be brought, to be makriv them b'Shabbatoi. So Shabbat is referring to Yom Kippur on Yom Kippur. So we see that the Chalav Shabbos can be brought on Yom Kippur. Apparently Yom Kippur is considered to be of a lesser, a little bit less prominent than Shabbos. As the Farshim explained, because the einish of a Aveira on Shabbos is skila, which is a penalty which is applied by Bezin, as opposed to the einish of a Aveira on Yom Kippur, which incurs kares, which is merely bidei shemayim. So Shabbos is regarded as most significant. Indeed, the Rishmal sources it from this pasuk, where we see that the karbanos of Shabbos can be brought on Yom Kippur. Yachol, perhaps I would think, Afshal Yom Kippur b'Shabbos, that the leftover carbon of Yom Kippur falls out on Friday, let's say, that the leftovers can be brought on Shabbos on the following day. Tamad Loima b'Shabbat toy. This is a miyut. Oila Shabbos b'Shabbat toy. So the pasuk here is excluding something, that only the Shabbos carbon could be brought on Yom Kippur, but not in the reverse. Divrei Bishmal. So Bishmal comes out that Shabbos is considered to be a higher madrega, a more prominent, significant day than Yom Kippur. Therefore, the carbon of Shabbos is brought on Yom Kippur, but the carbon of Yom Kippur is not to be brought on Shabbos. Rabbi Kiva Eimer, he holds Shabbos and Yom Tov on the same level. Oila Shabbos v'Shabbatei, what does it teach us? There's a riboy and a miyut. So the riboy is limet. The pasuk teaches us al chil Shabbos shekrevim b'Yom Tov. The pasuk is teaching us if Yom Tov falls out after Shabbos, then the leftover fats from the carbon brought yesterday on Shabbos can be brought that night, even though it's Yom Tov. So Oila Shabbos b'Shabbatei, according to Rabbi Kiva, b'Shabbatei is referring to Yom Tov, and the Oila Shabbos can be brought b'Shabbatei Yom Tov. Yochel af Yom Kippur, and perhaps even bringing those fats on Yom Kippur, which follows Shabbos, are permissible. Talmud Loima b'Shabbatei, we have an exclusion, a miyut. Only the Chel b'Shabbos can be brought on Yom Tov, but not on Yom Kippur. So according to Rabbi Kiva, the conclusion is that Shabbos and Yom Tov are considered to be on the same turf, on the same level. There's no source to derive the discrepancy between Shabbos and Yom Kippur. The pasuk is simply telling us that the Oila of Shabbos can be brought on Yom Tov. Says the Gemara, when you properly analyze their opinions and delve into the basis and the background of why Rabbi Shmuel approached it his way and Rabbi Kiva took his approach, so you'll figure out as follows. L'divrei Rabbi Shmuel, l'dorim l'davis krevim Yom Tov. According to Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, a neder, a nedava, a carbon which a person is bringing as a vow, a nedava as a donation, one can bring them on Yom Tov. There's a discussion in Maseches Beitza regarding these carbonates, because really they're not time sensitive. Why is he bringing it specifically on Yom Tov? So the machlek is whether or not a person can bring his nedarim and nedavas on Yom Tov. So apparently, says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel maintains that one may bring a neder or nedav on Yom Tov. So there's no need for the pasuk to tell us that if there are leftover fats from the Shabbos carbon of yesterday, you can bring it on Yom Tov. Certainly, of course, if you can bring a neder and a dava which are not time-based at all, you can bring them on Yom Tov. Certainly, the leftover fats from a carbon which was brought yesterday on Shabbos, which was absolutely time-related, certainly that can be brought on Yom Tov. There's no need for the pasuk to tell us that. So therefore, apparently the pasuk which is coming to include something, v'chi itzrich kra liyom kippurim. Apparently the pasuk is needed for a different halacha to tell us that you can bring those fats of Shabbos on Yom Kippur. So that's how Rabbi Shmuel arrives at his conclusion. However, Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva's opinion, and Darim and Davis ain't craving Yom Tov. He holds they cannot be brought on Yom Tov. Therefore, the pasuk here is required to teach us. What do we need the pasuk for? Lemishra b'Yom Tov, to allow you to bring those fats of Shabbos, of the yesterday's Shabbos carbon, to bring them on Yom Tov, because ordinary Nadarim and Davis that can't be brought on Yom Tov. So the pasuk is needed to tell you, but the Shabbos carbon, that can be brought on Yom Tov. Therefore, there's no pasuk available regarding Yom Kippur. So he has no source about the Shabbos carbon being brought on Yom Kippur, and therefore he concludes that Shabbos and Yom Kippur are regarded as equals, and one cannot bring the carbon of Shabbos and Yom Kippur. So in summary, from the pasuk of Oilas Shabbos v'Shabbatei, we derive two things: a riboy and a miut. Rabbi Shmuel's approach is that the riboy is coming to teach us that the chelvei Shabbos can be brought on Yom Kippur. The miut tells us that the chelvei Yom Kippur cannot be brought on Shabbos, because according to him, Shabbos is considered to be a more prominent day than Yom Kippur. Rabbi Kiva maintains the pasuk is coming to teach us something entirely different. The riboy tells us that the chelvei Shabbos can be brought on Yom Tov. The Mir tells us that the Chalva Shabbos cannot be brought on Yom Kippur. Continues the Gemara. Amar Abzeira, Ki Avina beBavel. When I lived in Bavel, I learned Torah in Bavel prior to arriving to Eretz Yisrael. Have Amri. I used to explain the concept of the following brisa as follows. Ha the Sanya. This that the following brisa says. Yom Kippurim shechol liyos be'erev Shabbos. Yom Kippur that falls on erev Shabbos. Lo yoyu toiken. They wouldn't blow the shofar. Ube Motzei Shabbos, when Yom Kippur fell out on Motzei Shabbos, lo yom avdil. They did not do Havdalah. So the point of Tkiyah on erev Shabbos, we learned this earlier in Masechah Shabbos, Daf Lamed Hey. They would build a shofar to herald in the upcoming Shabbos, to indicate to all that there's a Shabbos coming. One is meant to refrain from doing malacha. So Tkiyah was employed generally when the upcoming event, the upcoming day, was a more significant, a more severe, more prominent day, which had more restrictions, for instance. So the Brisa tells us that if Yom Kippur falls on Erev Shabbos, there was no need to make Tkiyah. Likewise, when Yom Kippur falls on Motzei Shabbos, there was no Havdalah. Havdalah generally symbolized the passing of a holy day, of a more prominent day. It was meant to highlight the contrast between the more prominent day that passed, and the coming day, which is of a lower level day. So on Yom Kippur that falls on Motzei Shabbos, there was no Havdalah performed. Says Reb Zera, I interpreted the content of this brisa. I said, Divrei HaKoili. This brisa reflects all shittas. It's an anonymous brisa. It goes according to Rishmal, goes according to Rekiva. Because there was no need to make Tkiyah on Erev Shabbos, because Yom Kippur is Asur B'Malacha, Shabbos is Asur B'Malacha. Likewise, there's no need to make Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos, because Shabbos and Yom Kippur are both days which are Asur B'Malacha. So I figured this brisa reflects all shittas. However, when I went up to Eretz Yisrael, I encountered Yehuda Breder Shimon Pazit, the Yosef, who was sitting with Kama, and he was saying as follows: Rabbi Kiva, this brisa reflects the opinion of Rabbi Kiva exclusively, who holds that Yom Kippur and Shabbos both have the same dinim. One cannot go ahead and, for instance, be makriv the fats of the Shabbos carbon on Yom Kippur. Therefore, there's no point of making an itkiyos, because the point of a tkiyah is to indicate a discrepancy between the lower, less prominent day and the more restrictive day. According to him, Yom Kippur and Shabbos are considered to be days of equal restriction, equal isser. Therefore, there's no point to make a tkiyah. However, the Rabbi Shmuel, because if this brisa would indeed be following Rabbi Shmuel's shita, it wouldn't work. Kivan the Amar, since Rabbi Shmuel said, Chelvei Shabbos Krev Yom Kippurim, since Rabbi Shmuel says that the chalavim of Shabbos are brought on the following day, on Yom Kippur that falls out after Shabbos. If so, Lidka, let them go ahead and blow in the case where Yom Kippur falls on Erev Shabbos, to indicate, look, Shabbos is coming. Shabbos, which is more restrictive. Shabbos, which is considered to be a higher, a more prominent day. A day of more Kedusha, more Isser. Let them make it Tkiyah. Why? Because this will indicate to the public that Yom Kippur is on a lower level than Shabbos. And if there is ever the chalavim, leftover fats from a carbon of Shabbos, one may bring it on the following day Yom Kippur. Now, even though this year, when Yom Kippur falls on Erev Shabbos, there's actually no practical application of this halacha, because Yom Kippur is before Shabbos, so there are no leftover fats from Shabbos being brought on Yom Kippur. Nevertheless, there's a point to be tekeh, to make that indication that, generally speaking, Yom Kippur is on a lower level than Shabbos, so that in the coming year, if Yom Kippur falls out on Motzei Shabbos, they should know that if there are leftover fats from the Shabbos carbon, you can bring in Yom Kippur. So apparently this brisa, which does not subscribe to any tkiyos on Yom Kippur that falls on Erev Shabbos, is not following, does not reflect Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. Again, says the Gemara, the Rabbi Shmuel, Kivan the Amar Chalvi Shabbos, Krev Yom Kippurim, since he holds that the Chalvi Shabbos are brought on Yom Kippur, if Yom Kippur falls out, Amatzah Shabbos, Lidka, if so, let them blow when Yom Kippur falls out on Erev Shabbos, to indicate that Shabbos is considered to be a higher, a more restricted day. So they should know, they should have an indication. The Chalvi Shabbos, Krev Yom Kippur, that in the following year, when Yom Kippur falls out on Matzah Shabbos, the Chalav Mos Shabbos can be brought on Yom Kippur. So this is what he was saying. Apparently this brayso reflects Rabbi Kiva and Arishmo. Va'amina le'Allah ana. As Reb Zeir is speaking, I responded to him, if that was the reason for the Tkiyah, there would be no Tkiyah. Why? Kahanim reason. The Kahanim which were involved in the Avodah, there was reason, they were conscientious, well-learned fellows, scholarly fellows, they know what they were doing. There would be no need to make a Tkiyah specifically to indicate to the Kahanim regarding the halachas of the Akrav, of the Chelav. That wouldn't be a need, that wouldn't be a reason to require Tkiyah. So indeed, this brayso could be following Rabbi Shmuel's Shita, who holds Yom Kippur is considered to be on a lower level than Shabbos. Why didn't they blow to teach regarding the Chelav? What do you need to teach the Kahanim? They know on their own. Amalei Makshisha, Breidav Chizla Ravashi. Mi Amrinon Kahanim Zrizim. Do we apply this concept of Kahanim Zrizim and we don't blow for them? And haven't we learned in the Mishnah? The Mishnah is describing, listing for us the many blows, the many tkiyas that were conducted in the Beis Hamikdash. And the Mishnah says as follows: Shalish. So the three of those tkiyas which took place on Erev Shabbos was lahavtil es ha'am malacha, in order to indicate to the to the public that they're meant to refrain from malacha coming Shabbos. Shalish, three blows will lahavtil ben kodesh l'chol, to actually go ahead and indicate that Shabbos is right here. Now we're meant to separate between kodesh and chol. So where were these tkiyas done? In the Beis Hamikdash. Apparently, the Beis Hamikdash need to know. The Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash need to know that Shabbos is coming. They need to have those tkiyas to give them the indications. So we see that even in the Beis Hamikdash, we did tkiyas for the Kohanim. Says the Gemara, no, that wasn't for the purpose of educating the Kohanim. Because the Amar Abaye, just as Abaye said regarding a different topic when they had this gold a plate which was hanging in the Beis Hamikdash, which was meant to deflect the rays of the sun to indicate that the time of reading Shema has arrived. So Abaye said it wasn't meant for the Kohanim. They didn't need these signs. They would know on their own. It was meant l'sh'ar amad b'Yerushalayim. It was meant for the rest of the folks, the rest of the people in Yerushalayim. Hachanami here as well regarding the tkiyas in the Beis Hamikdash, even though they took place in the Beis Hamikdash, but it wasn't really directed at the Kohanim. Hachanami l'sh'ar amad b'Yerushalayim was needed for the rest of the people in Yerushalayim. Okay, says the Gemara. Fine. So they didn't need to do the tkiyah for the Kohanim. However, there was a need to make a tkiyah, even according to Rabbi Kiva. According to both shitas, Rabbi Kiva says the Gemara, there is a need to blow a shofar. When? When Yom Kippurim falls out on Erev Shabbos. Why? In order to indicate that there is some leniency which is contained in Yom Kippur and not on Shabbos. Says Rabbi Litka, let them blow. That they should know. This was a special allowance. Knivas Yorak means trimming of the leaves off the vegetables to prepare them for cooking on Yom Kippur. So, Allah, generally speaking, one is not meant to make a chana, prepare from a Shabbos to a weekday, from Yom Kippur to a weekday. But Rashi explains that Chacham applied a special leniency regarding preparing vegetables on Yom Kippur, min ha-mincha lamala, from the mincha time and on, which is 9.5 hours into the day and on. Of course, we're speaking about Shoy Zmaniyos. So, from mincha lamala, one can go ahead and prepare those vegetables. Why? Because the point of Yom Kippur is v'nisem es nafshes seichem. One is meant to have agony, pain, discomfort. Getting involved in food preparation, so close to the end of Yom Kippur, where a person begins anticipating the upcoming meal. So he gets involved in preparation, but he can't partake in it. This adds to his inui, to his pain and discomfort. Therefore, the Chacham did away with the Isser of Achana, which generally applies, and they allowed him to prepare, since it adds to the Agmas Nefesh, to the agony. So this is a leniency which is specific to Yom Kippur. It says more, let them blow, to indicate that the upcoming day, Shabbos, following Yom Kippur, is a more stringent form of day, which does not contain this allowance, as opposed to Yom Kippur, where this allowance is applied. Says more Litka, let him blow, the lady, so they should know the Shari, that Yom Kippur is a day of lesser severity with regard the Shari. I should know that it's allowed, that it's mutar b'knivas yorak. Yom Kippur is a day where one is allowed to trim the vegetables. Rav Yosef, that wouldn't be a reason to blow the shofar. Blowing shofar is actually a shvus. It's a drabanan. Lefi, because she'ain doich and shvus, Chacham did not do away a shvus, like blowing the shofar lahater, simply to indicate, to notify the public about a permissibility, about a heter. This wouldn't be reason enough to allow blowing the shofar. So this is one answer. Rav Shisha ben Arvidi Amar, he gave a different approach. Why would they not blow for this reason? Let's analyze. When is this heter applicable? Certainly not this year. When Yom Kippur falls out on Erev Shabbos, it's not practical, because there's no point in preparing vegetables on Yom Kippur late afternoon. You can't cook it tonight. Tonight's Shabbos. So the only point for blowing would be for a different year, as an indication to educate the public regarding a different year, that one may go ahead and prepare vegetables on Yom Kippur. Says Rav Shisha ben Arvidi, Shvus kroi v'hitiru. Chacham only allowed a shvus, blowing a shofar, for an immediate heter, something which is an immediate benefit. Shvus rechoika, to allow a shvus for a distant benefit, something in the future. Lo yitiru, that wouldn't be reason enough to allow the shvus. So that's why they wouldn't blow on Yom Kippur that falls out on Erev Shabbos, because at most it's coming to teach us that there's some sort of heter in the distant future. This is not reason enough to allow a shvus. Says the Gemara, but a shvus which indicates, which notifies regarding an impending heter, an immediate benefit, that they would allow, ushvus kroivi tiru, ba'tanan, having in the Mishnah, Yom Tov shecholi is Erev Shabbos. If Yom Tov falls on Erev Shabbos, they would blow to indicate that the oncoming Shabbos is a day of more prominence. It's a more prominent day. It's a more restrictive day. But they would not do Havdalah, because Havdalah is just the opposite. It indicates that the passing day, the day that is already passed, is considered to be a higher level day. So Yom Tov Erev Shabbos, they would do Tkiyah to herald in the upcoming Shabbos, but no Havdalah. Motzoi Shabbos, if Yom Tov falls out on Motzoi Shabbos, Mavdilan, they would make Havdalah. The Nusach is Mavdal Ben Kodesh LeKodesh. Why? Because Shabbos is considered to be on a higher level than Yom Tov. Yom Tov, you're allowed to do Malacha for Echel Nevesh, for food preparation. So Havdalah was in place, V'loi Toikin, but certainly not Tkiyah, which usually indicates that the new day is a higher level. Says the Gemara. So we understand why on Erev Shabbos they would blow, because Shabbos is considered to be a higher level day, because Malacha is Eichel Nefesh or Asr. So the Tkiyah was meant to indicate that Shabbos is considered to be more prominent than the passing day in Yom Tov. Likewise, on Motzei Shabbos, they would make Havdalah to indicate that the passing Shabbos was a higher level day, a more prominent day than the upcoming Yom Tov day. Says the Gemara, V'amai Litzka, on Motzei Shabbos, if Yom Tov falls out on Motzei Shabbos, they should go ahead and blow. Why? So that the public knows the Shari b'shchita la'alter. It's Yom Tov. One may engage in malachas for food preparation. One may go ahead and shech the animal. Go ahead, get involved in preparing the meal, Simchas Yom Tov. There's a reason to make tkiyah. And here, it's an immediate benefit. It's for right here and now. So why didn't they make a tkiyah? If you say that a shvus karoiva, they allowed the shvus for something of immediate benefit, why didn't they allow it in this case? Ella machvarta, Rav Yosef, says the Gemara, rather, the clarity, the true approach is, in accordance to Rav Yosef's approach, the reason why they wouldn't blow on Yom Kippur that fell out on Erev Shabbos was simply because, what's the point of blowing? To indicate that permissibility of preparing the vegetables. Chacham would not allow a shvus, to be conducted, blowing a shofar, simply for the sake of notifying a heter. Likewise, in this case, when Yom Tov falls on Motzei Shabbos, they wouldn't go ahead and blow the shofar simply to indicate that one can go ahead and be sheikh the karbanis, because they did not allow a shvus for the sake of notifying a heter. So in summary, we learned about Yom Tov that fell out on Erev Shabbos. There was a tkiyah performed to indicate that the upcoming day, Shabbos, is a more restricted day. One is also to engage in food preparation, in malachos of Eichel Nefesh, in contrast to the passing day, which was Yom Tov, in which Eichel Nefesh was mutter. If Yom Tov falls out on Motzei Shabbos, we are mavdil, to indicate that the passing day, Shabbos, was a more restricted day, and Yom Tov, the upcoming Yom Tov, is a day where preparation of Eichel Nefesh is allowed. The Gemara told us they would not blow the shofar to indicate that one can go ahead and be sheichet a behema for the Suda of Yom Tov. Why? Because blowing is a shvus. They did not allow a shvus for the sake of notifying a heter. What if Yom Kippur falls on Erev Shabbos? We learned that there was no tkiyah conducted, because although perhaps there would be a need to make a tkiyah to indicate that Shabbos is considered to be more restrictive than Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, one may go ahead and prepare those vegetables in contrast to Shabbos. But the reason then again is that a shvus for the sake of notifying a heter was not conducted. If Yom Kippur falls on Motzei Shabbos, there was no havdalah. Continues the Gemara. Omar Rav Zera, Omar Rav Huna. V'amala, some say it was Omar Rav Abba, Omar Rav Huna. This is again regarding the halacha of preparing vegetables, where on Yom Kippur it's mutter, but on Shabbos it's also. What about Yom Kippurim shechol yes b'Shabbos? So Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos. So on the one hand, on Yom Kippur, it's mutter. On the other hand, on Shabbos, it's also. So they both come together. What is the halacha? Can one prepare those vegetables late afternoon? Says the Gemara, Yom Kippur shechol yes b'Shabbos asur b'knivas yorek. One cannot go ahead and trim those vegetables. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Mana, Tana. We learned in the Brisa, or there's a Gersa, the Bach says Tani Amihachi. We learned the same in the following Brisa, Ben 9 Yom Kippurim. Shechol yes b'Shabbos. How do we know if Yom Kippur falls down on Shabbos? She'asur b'knivas yorek. One may not go ahead and trim those vegetables. Tamar loymar Shabbosain. The pasuk is describing resting on Shabbos, and the pasuk uses the word Shabbosain. What is the meaning of this extra word Shabbosain? Shvois. You meant to rest on Shabbos. Says more lemai. What activity is this pasuk referring to? The pasuk is referring to doing actual malacha. For instance, trimming actual vegetables off the earth. So he's detaching vegetables. Says the Gemara V'Ksiv, malacha. How can we say that the Brisa here is coming to tell you that one may not go ahead and detach vegetables off the ground? It's a pasuk, it's a law that says malacha. Why do we need that extra pasuk of Shabbosain to teach us that? Elo lav, apparently the Brisa says that the word Shabbosain is coming to tell you shvois, rest, even from trimming those vegetables. What is the Brisa referring to? Elo lav aknivas yorak. Apparently the Brisa is referring to trimming detached vegetables. He's not actually doing a malacha, detaching vegetables min ha-mechubar from the ground. We're speaking about detached vegetables. The Brisa tells us that the pasuk Shabbosain teaches us that on Shabbos one is meant to rest even from this form of labor, even from trimming vegetables, and it asur min ha-Torah. Shma mina, indeed we hear from here that one may not go ahead and trim those vegetables. It is asur min ha-Torah on Shabbos. So if Shabbos falls out on Yom Kippur, one may not go ahead and prepare those vegetables, because here it involves the asur min ha-Torah, because it's Shabbos. Now this pasuk of Shabbosain is strictly for Shabbos. As Rashi points out, this will not apply to an ordinary Yom Kippur. The point on ordinary Yom Kippur is v'nisam samshei seichem. One is meant to engage in inoi, in agony, and in pain and discomfort. And as we said earlier, preparing those vegetables actually add to one's discomfort. Therefore, on an ordinary Yom Kippur, one may prepare those vegetables. On an ordinary Shabbos, we have a pasuk which doesn't allow it. And therefore, if Shabbos and Yom Kippur fall out together, one cannot go ahead and trim those vegetables. He has an opposing view. Yom Kippur shechol yes b'Shabbos. If Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, mutar b'knivas yorak. One may go ahead and trim those vegetables, because he holds that trimming vegetables on Shabbos is not asur min ha-Torah. It's only a shvus because he's preparing for the weekday. Now the Chacham did away with the shvus when it's Yom Kippur, because it adds to the agony, to the pain, to the agmas nefesh. Therefore they allowed it. Meisvei, says the more we have a kasha from this Brisa, Menai Yom Kippur. Shecholi is b'Shabbos. She'asa b'knives yorek. How do we know that if Yom Kippur falls on a Shabbos? Oh, may not go ahead and trim those vegetables. Tamalam Shabbosayin. Shvois. You must rest. Now, this is the Brisa. Lemai. Now, when the Brisa speaks about the Isser of trimming vegetables, Lemai, what is it referring to? Ilema, Lemalacha. Is the Brisa referring to actually trimming vegetables off the ground, which is a Malacha min HaTorah? There's no need for an additional pasuk of Shabbos and Shvois. We have a pasuk, a law, a prohibition against doing a malacha on Shabbos. Elo lav. Apparently, what is the Brisa speaking about? B'kneves yorak, going out and trimming the vegetables. And the Brisa is telling us that even kneves yorak is included in the Isser of Shabbos and Shvois. Says no. The Brisa is discussing actually doing a malacha. Kneves yorak means trimming vegetables off the ground, detaching them off the ground. A malacha deraisa. If so, why do we need that additional pasuk of Shabbos? And we already know loisasik malacha. Says the Gemara to teach us that not only is there a lav, there's an assay as well. There's a double isser here. V'lav aleh be'asay v'loisasay. In order to add another restriction, another isser essay. If a person detaches something off the ground, not only is it over on a loisasay loisasik malacha, there's an additional prohibition based on the essay of Shabbosayin, which teaches us shvois. But certainly trimming vegetables which are already detached, there's no issur whatsoever in Torah, even on Shabbos. It only involves the issur rabbanan of achana preparation, which is a shvus rabbanan, which was done away with when it is actually Yom Kippur, on account of the added pain and discomfort that it causes a person. So even if Yom Kippur falls on Shabbos, this is mutter. Says the Tanika Vasei Rabbi Yochanan, we have a Brisa in support of Rabbi Yochanan. Yom Kippurim shecholi b'Shabbos. Even if Yom Kippur falls on a Shabbos, mutter b'knives yorak. Trimming vegetables are mutter. Let's keep over the parentheses. Mefatzim be'goizim. When we crack nuts, when we peel pomegranates, mina mincha lamala. Because it adds agmas nefesh, pain and discomfort. So apparently, even on Shabbos, it's not asur min HaTorah. Merely midrabanan, since it's considered to be hachana for the weekdays. But if Yom Kippur falls on a Shabbos, they did away with that isser because it adds agmas nefesh. Continues the Gemara, Devei Rabbi Yehuda, in the household of Rabbi Yehuda, Mekan v'Karva, they trimmed cabbage. Devei Rabba, in the houses of Rabba, Gardi Kari, they would scrape, they cut the pumpkins on Yom Kippur. However, given the Chaza, once Rabba noticed that they would advance, they began prior to the permitted time, so he wanted to stop this practice, but he had difficulty because he had already told them they can prepare vegetables on Yom Kippur. So he devised a plan. Amalu, he told them, a letter came from West Eretz Yisrael, Mishmei Rav Yochanan, Edinei Rav Yochanan the Aser, that one is not allowed to prepare vegetables on Yom Kippur altogether. This way, they would cease from their practice. So in summary, trimming vegetables on Shabbos is Aser. Either midrabanan because of hachana, or according to one sheet of the Gemara, it's Aser midaraisa, due to the pasuk of Shabbos. Trimming on Yom Kippur, mina minchal mal is mutter because it adds agmas nefesh. On Yom Kippur that falls on Shabbos, we have machlokes, and it's really based on the question of whether the Isser on Shabbos is midrabanan, in which case, if Yom Kippur falls on Shabbos, it's mutter. Or if the Isser on Shabbos is based on the Torah, Isser min Torah, in which case, if Yom Kippur falls on Shabbos, it is Aser as well. Hadran alach ve'eluk shar. Good time for a brief review of today's daf. The Gemara told us that one's attire is meant to reflect the event. The kohen doing the karbanis in the Beis Hamikdash is meant to have big day kahuna of higher value, higher quality. We learned that the beged of a Talmud Chacham is meant to be clean. His shoes are not meant to have those double patches. We learned about different levels of scholarship of Talmud Chachamim regarding different contexts. Regarding a chatzitza on a mardas, on a saddle cloth of a donkey, if the stain goes through, it is visible on both sides, then it's considered to be a chatzitza for tefillah. How large a stain? According to Tanakam, even a small stain, according to Shlomo Gamliel, needs to be the size of a coin of a isser. Regarding a stain on a beged, we have three shitas. According to Tanakam, the stain needs to be visible on both sides. According to Rabbi Yehuda, even on one side. According to Rabbi Yosi, the beged of the banoin, which are meant to be cleaner, even a one-sided stain is sufficient. Who are banoim? We have two versions, either Talmid Chachamim, who keep up the world, or those articles of clothing used in the Beis HaMerchatz. So banoim means bei bani, used in the Beis HaMerchatz, which are meant to be exceptionally clean. We learned about the pasuk Oila Shabbos Shabbatai, which contains a ribi and a miyat. According to Rishmal, the ribi is that the chelva Yom Kippurim are brought on Shabbos, not in reverse. According to Akiva, It's coming to include the Chalvei Shabbos, which are born on Yom Tov, but Shabbos and Yom Kippur are regarded on the same level. We learned about the concept of Tkiyah, which heralds in a day which is more restricted, and Havdalah, which is meant to differentiate between the passing day, which is of higher stature. So if Yom Tov falls on Erev Shabbos, they would do a Tkiyah to indicate that Shabbos was on a higher level. Yom Tov falls out on Matzah Shabbos, they would make Havdalah. Regarding Yom Kippur that falls out either Erev Shabbos or Matzah Shabbos, there was no Tkiyah and no Havdalah. We learned about trimming vegetables. On Shabbos, it was Asr. On Yom Kippur, Min HaMincha Mala Mutter. On Yom Kippur that falls on Shabbos, we have a Machlekes.